I hope your day is going on well. This is an introduction video for Microsoft Excel Basics. In this video, we will learn an overview of Excel as well as what Excel does. Here are a list of the things that we will cover in this video. To get started, we will open a new Excel workbook. If you can recall from the Windows Explorer videos, we learned how to open Microsoft programs. You can either click on the Start menu, and from the Start menu, you can see that I have Excel pinned to the Start menu. If Excel is not pinned on the Start menu, you can type on the search bar Excel, or you can type on this search bar Excel to open the Excel program. For our case here, I have Excel pinned on the taskbar, so I will escape and I will click on the Excel icon here on the taskbar. Excel starts in Backstage View. From the Backstage View, you can open a new blank workbook, open an existing workbook, or create a workbook based on the templates. You can also open the recently opened workbooks here. We will open a new workbook by either pressing the Enter key or clicking the blank workbook, or by pressing Escape key on your keyboard. A quick recap and overview of the ribbon as we have learned from the previous videos. This app here is called the ribbon. It contains grouped command buttons, and you can click on these buttons to execute commands. Right here, these are called the tabs. The ribbon is organized in tabs, and each tab has a group of related commands for particular tasks. These here are the groups that are on each tab, and each tab has different groups. The groups contain buttons for related commands on each of the tabs. Right here, we have the search bar, and you can use this to find a command or access the Office help system. This right here is called the name box, and it displays the cell reference of the active cell. This right here is the formula bar. It displays what is in the active cell. You can enter or edit data in the active cell or from the formula bar. On the right side here, we have the minimize button. It reduces the window so that its program icon is visible on this taskbar. Right here, we have the restore down button. It returns a window to its previous size, and if the maximize button appears, it expands the window to fill the entire screen. Right here, we have the close button, so if you would like to close your window, you use this button to close your window. The name of a current workbook will appear on the title bar. When you open a new workbook, by default, it's named Book 1. Excel contains a collection of sheets within a single file. A new workbook will open with a single sheet, named Sheet 1 by default. This is called a worksheet, and it is laid out in a grid of rows and columns. The column headings are the letters along the top of the workbook window, and it's identified as columns. The row headings are numbers along the left side of the workbook window, and is identified as rows. The intersection of a row and a column forms a cell where you enter data and formulas. The currently selected cell is called the active cell. And with the currently selected cell, on the name box also, you can see the name of the active cell right there. To save a new workbook, you can click on the file to open the Backstage View, and then click Save As to save your work. I will click to go back here. To efficiently save a new workbook, you can use the keyboard shortcut, which will open the Save As dialog box for you. The keyboard shortcut that you use to save as is F12. And if you're using your laptop, you would press the Function key and the F12 key to open the Save As dialog box. Once the Save As dialog box opens, then you can select where you want to save your workbook and change the name of your workbook. And we will name this workbook Introduction to Microsoft Excel. And then you can either press Enter or click Save. And you can see up here, we already renamed our new workbook to Introduction Microsoft Excel. So the next thing that we need to do is to rename our Sheet 1. So we'll double click on that. And once that is double clicked, we can start to type the name of the sheet. We'll name this sheet as Data Types and Enter. So now we have renamed our worksheet and we have renamed our workbook. With our workbook and worksheet named, we will now learn how to enter data. But before we start entering the data, we will learn on the different types of data in Excel and the default alignment on each of these. Right now, the active cell is cell C5, and you can see C5 on the name box. I would like to go to cell A1, and the way I can do that, I can either click on cell A1, or I can type A1 on the name box, or I can use the keyboard shortcut Control Home, and it will take me to cell A1. So right here, I will type types of data, and then I will use the tab key and type default alignment, and then I will provide some examples. So on the examples, I will provide several examples. So what I will do, I will select cell C1, D1, and E1, and F1, and I want to merge these cells. But the way I will merge these cells, I will use the keyboard shortcut Control 1, and the Format Cells dialog box open, and I will click on the Alignment tab, and right here on the text alignment, on the horizontal, click on that arrow, and I will click Center Across Selection. And then I will click OK. And in that way, I have centered across these cells right there. So right here, I will give the examples of each type of data. So the first type of data will be the text values. And then we have number values. And we have logical values or Boolean. And then we have formula errors. And we have empty cells. I would like to show you how to fit this text into the column. So I can either drag in between the column A and B and drag all the way to the right, or drag back to the left, and I will drag all the way up to number values. But I still have logical values, which is in between column A and B. So for this one, I will not resize the column, but I would like to show you how to wrap the text, and I will wrap this text so that it will fit in this cell. So to do that, I will come to the alignment group on the home tab and then click that button, wrap text. And now we can see now that is wrapped right there. So we will see the default alignment on each of these. So by default, the text is aligned to the left, and examples of this will be Excel. I can type. So this, if you type a date wrong, it will align to the left because Excel will term this as a text. So even if I were to resize this column, we can see that is aligned to the left. If I were to type time in the wrong format, that too aligns to the left because we have typed the time in the wrong format. We will see this as we type in the number values. So these are examples of the text values. So right here, we'll come to the number values. Number values by default are aligned to the right. And an example of that will be, that's a number, it's aligned to the right. We can type a date. Date is a number, and we will learn more about the dates in the upcoming videos. And we can see now the date is aligned to the right. That's a number. So if we type time also in the correct format, and I will do the same time and space and type PM. And we can see now that is aligned to the right and it's in the correct format. So for the logical values, all these are centered and they are capitalized. An example of this will be the word true. I will type this in lowercase letters. And once I enter, we can see that now is capitalized and it is centered. I will come back here to cell B4. And since my wording, you cannot see the entire text because of the column width, instead of adjusting the column width, I will wrap the text just like I did with the logical values text. I will wrap that, and we can see now it is centered and capitalized. That is wrapped right there. So the other example would be false. So I will type false. And once I enter, you can see that also is capitalized and it is centered. So even if I were to type this in uppercase letters, So I will type true again. And you can see once I enter, it will be centered. And you can see that is centered as well. So all logical values are centered and they are capitalized. When it comes to the formula errors, these two are capitalized and they are centered. So I will type the same thing. And as I start to type that, you can see Excel recognizes that the same text right there. And what it's trying to do for me here is autofill. And instead of typing, I can autofill. And now to do that, I will just press enter. And it autofills that text for me right there. But I would like to wrap this because I do not want to adjust the column width right here. So I will wrap this. I will come back here to wrap text. And now that is wrapped. So an example of a formula error would be if you were to divide a text with a number. So I will divide equals Excel divide by a number. That gives you an error, and you can see it's centered and it is capitalized. The same thing if you were to divide the number by 0. So equals, I will just pick that number and I'll divide by 0. And you can see same thing, it gives us an error right there. So formula errors, they are centered and they are capitalized as well. So the other data type is the empty cell. Empty cell may cause trouble for you when you're working on your data. So it's good to understand that you have empty cells in your data and to be on the lookout for them in case you have any errors. One more thing that I would like to show you before I show you how to add another sheet is to add borders to my data. I like to do that to make sure that it looks organized and it's easy for you to read, or whoever will be reading, it's easy for them to read. So to do that, I will select all that. So I'm using my selection cursor. That is my selection cursor. Or the other way that I can select all these data, it's select any cell right there and then use my keyboard shortcut, Control Shift 8, and that will select all my data. And then I will come here on my home tab on the font group and click on the border button, and then I will select all borders. And then once I do that, I have all borders on my data. So I will style that. I will select the top row right there. And I will add some style on this. I will add some color. If you're following along, you can select the color of your choice. So I will click on the fill color button and I will choose a color. I will choose that color. And now that looks good and it's easy to follow and it's easy for you to understand the types of data, the default alignment on each type of data, and then we have examples of each type of data listed there. So the next thing that we will learn is to add a new worksheet to our workbook. So to add a new worksheet, at the bottom of your workbook, click on the plus icon to add a new sheet. And then once it's added, it's named as sheet 2. To rename it, you can either double click on it, and once it's ready for you to edit, you can give it a name that you would like to name it. Or you can also right click on it and then you will have an option to rename it, to delete it, to move or copy it into a different workbook or in the same workbook. So we will rename this as gradebook. Then press enter. So that is renamed. So if you would like to copy this same worksheet on this same workbook, you will click on the worksheet that you would like to copy and then hold down the control key and then drag that mouse up there. And once you see the icon there with the plus symbol, you can drag it to where you would like to paste the worksheet. And once you release it, you can see that I have copied the same worksheet in the same workbook. And now it's named data types 2 because I already have another data types worksheet right there. So if you would like to delete a worksheet, as I said, you will right click on it and then you will click delete. Please be careful when you're deleting the worksheet because there's no way to recover it. Once you delete it, it's completely gone. So I will delete that. I don't need that because this is a copy of our data types worksheet. And you can see Excel is warning you that the Microsoft Excel will permanently delete this sheet, and you want to continue. And for us, yes, we want to permanently delete that. So I will click delete, and that worksheet is deleted. So the other thing that I would like to show you, if you would like to copy a worksheet from one book to a different workbook. I have two Excel workbooks open right here, and what I would like to copy is this worksheet from this workbook to the current workbook that we are working on. So to do that, I will right click and I will open the drop down menu. Then I will select Move All Copy. So if I would like to move this worksheet from this workbook to the workbook that I am currently working on, I will make sure that I don't select create a copy. But for our case here, because we want to keep a copy of this worksheet, but also copy the same worksheet in a different workbook, we'll make sure that create a copy box is checked. And then we'll make sure move selected sheets, select the workbook that we would like to move it to, and we'll select Introduction to Microsoft Excel because that's the current workbook that we are working on. So I will click on that. And now Excel wants to know where do I want to place this new worksheet. And I will click Move to the end because I would like this worksheet placed at the end. And then I will click OK. And once I do that, I can see now that I have copied this worksheet from the workbook where it was previously into the current workbook that I am working on. As we learn Excel, it is important to know what Excel does. Excel does two things. Excel does calculations and data analysis. With calculations, this involves calculating an answer, and data analysis involves converting raw data into useful information for decision making. In this video, we get to learn some of the many formulas that we will learn in this class to make calculations. I will click on the gradebook worksheet. The first problem that we'll work on here is to learn how to calculate the test score as well as the percentage grade. We will create a gradebook for summer quarter. We'll learn how to enter all these names and then enter all these data and then do the calculations for the total score, percentage grade, as well as the average score. So I'll move this to the side. I will click on cell A1 and I will type gradebook for summer quarter. Enter, type name, enter, maximum possible points, and then enter. So the other thing that I would like to do, I would like to center gradebook for summer quarter across selection. So I will select cell A1 using the selection cursor all the way up to cell L1. And then I'll use my keyboard shortcut Control-1 and then open the Format Cells dialog box. On the Alignment tab, on the text alignment, click on the horizontal, click on that arrow, and then select Center Across Selection, and then click OK. Now that is centered across selection. So now I will click on the maximum possible points, and I would like to resize this. I can either double click when I see the resize cursor for the column. I can either double click on that, or I can drag it all the way to where I want to adjust the width for that column. And now that is adjusted. So the next thing that I would like to do, I would like to enter the name of the students as they are listed right here on this picture. So I will enter those names here. So once I have all those names entered, I will come up here to cell B2 and I will type quiz 1 all the way up to test 4. So I will type quiz 1 and then I'll press Control Enter. So instead of typing quiz 2, 3, and 4, I will use the autofill handle. So that's called the autofill handle. And then I will drag all the way to the right. And as I drag, you can see it's autofilling for me quiz 2, quiz 3, and quiz 4. And then I will release my mouse. And then the next thing, I will click on cell F2 and I will type test 1, Control Enter. And then again, I will use the autofill handle and I will drag all the way until I get to test number 4. And then I will release my mouse. So the next thing that I will do on the maximum possible points, for the quizzes, it's 30 points, and for the test, it's 100 points. So for quiz 1, I will type 30, Control Enter to remain in the same cell. And then I will use autofill, which will autofill for me the 30 points for all the quizzes. And then once I'm done with the quizzes, I will click on cell F3 and I will type 100, Control Enter. And then I will do the same thing, which will autofill for me the 100 points for every test. And then enter. So now that is done. The next thing that I need to do is to type in or to enter the data for all the quizzes and the test for all the students. So if I am typing the quizzes score for all the students, I can either type that vertically, and when I'm typing vertically, I will have to use the enter key. So if I type 27, enter, 15, enter, 21, enter, 10, enter, 13, enter, 17, enter, 18, and then enter, 20, enter, 28. So I can do that and enter all my data vertically. The other thing that I can do, I will go ahead and delete this course, and I will show you a different way also that you can enter the data. I will select all the cells that I will need to enter the data for all the students. And then you can see I have selected all that, and my active cell right there is B4. So I will type all the scores for the students, and I will start with the first student, and then I will tab to go to the next cell. Tab, 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 and then to go to the next row, I will click tab again, and it takes me to the next row. And tab again to the next row. Tab to the next row, and I will enter all the data. I'll pause the video to enter all the data. With all the data entered and still selected, I will click anywhere to unselect those cells. And then now the next thing that we'll need to do, we'll need to learn how to calculate the sum for each, or the total for each of the scores of every student, and then we'll do the average. So the first thing that I would like to do on cell J2, I would like to name that total scores. And then tab, percentage grade. And then tab again, percentage grade, because we will use two different formulas to calculate the percentage grade. And then enter. Right here, I see that the column for total scores is not fully visible. So to make the total scores fully visible, I can either drag using the adjusting cursor all the way to the right, or I can double click on it, and that adjusts the column width for my total scores. So right here, I will use the first formula, and we would like to add the totals for all the maximum possible points, and then get the totals for all the scores for the students. So to add, we will use equals sum. And once we type that, we can see the equals sum formula is right there. And we can see from the screen tip, it adds all the numbers in a range of cells. So what I will do, instead of double clicking, I don't like double clicking, I will use the tab key on my keyboard, and that selects the function that I would like to use. What I do not want you to do, I don't want you to type equals and then get that cell reference, use a plus symbol, add to that, and then plus that, plus that, plus that. That is not efficient. What I want you to do is to use the sum function. So I will backspace that and type equals sum. tap that, and then I will select the entire range of the cells that I would like to add, and then Control Enter to remain in the same cell. And now that gives me the total for all the maximum possible points. And we can see on the formula bar, our formula is listed right there. So the other way to do the sum formula, I will delete that. On the Home tab, on the Editing group, right here you can see we have the Auto Sum button. So if you click on that, automatically it selects for you the range that Excel thinks you need to add, and you can just press Enter. We also have a keyboard shortcut for sum, and I will delete that. And the keyboard shortcut is Alt equals, and that selects again what Excel thinks you need to add. So Excel thinks that's the range that I will need to add. If that's not the range that you need to add, no problem, you can adjust that as long as you can see the dancing ants. I can select that. But for our case, that's the range that we needed to add. So I will go back and select that. And then I will press Control Enter to remain in the same cell. And we can see still we have our total, which is still the same using all those different methods that I've shown you how to use the sum function. So now the next thing, instead of coming down here and doing the same thing here, I will use my fill handle and I will double click to copy my formula all the way down to my last student on the list. So I will double click on that and I can see it autofills for me and copies all the formula to calculate all the totals for these other students. So I will come to the last cell here and I will press F2 to put my cell into edit mode. And I can see the formula right there, and I can see the cell range of what I am adding is selected right there. And my formula is correct. So I'll press Escape to get out of the edit mode. So now the next thing that I will need to do, I will need to show you how to calculate the percentage grade for each of the students' course. So to calculate the percentage grade, we'll be getting the total score for each student, and then we'll be dividing that by the maximum possible total scores. One thing that I would like you to note is that as we copied our formula down for the sum, all these were relative cell reference, which means as we were copying, the cells were moving relatively down throughout the copy action, which means we had a cell reference of B to I on the first student. And then when we moved to the last student, it was the same thing. It was from column B to column I. That is a relative cell reference, which is moving relatively throughout the copy action. But when you come now to the percentage grade, we want to use an absolute cell reference where we will lock the maximum possible points so that when we copy our formula down, it will be locked throughout the copy action, and the 520, which is the maximum possible total points, will not move relatively down, but all the students will refer to the total scores for 520. So to do that, I will start my formula with an equal sign. So always remember the formula starts with an equal sign. And I will use a cell reference for J4, and then I will divide. I will use the division symbol on my keyboard, divide with cell reference J3, which is 520. Now, what I mean by a relative cell reference, to show you this much better, if I Control Enter, you notice I did not lock cell J3. So if I Control Enter and I copy this down, come to the last cell and press F2, you notice that I did not lock cell J3, which is the maximum possible points. Now, when I copy my formula down, it's moving relatively down throughout the copy action. And now you can see instead of my cell reference being J3, it's J11. So to correct that, so that all this scores for the students will be divided by the maximum possible total scores, I will undo that. So I will escape to get out of the edit mode. and then I'll press Ctrl Z to undo that, and then I'll press F2 to get on the edit mode. And now when my cursor is on J3, I will press F4 key to lock that. And you can see now with the $sign on J and the $sign on 3, that cell is locked on J3. And no matter now where I copy my formula, it will not move in my copy action. So I will Control Enter, and I will use my angry rabbit to copy down, my copy cursor to copy down. I will double click on that. And now when I come to the last cell and press F2, I can see now my maximum possible points didn't move down throughout the copy action, but it's locked right there on J3. And I can see I'm using the cell reference for J3 for all my students. And I can see that if I click there, I can see it's using J3 throughout the copy action. So I will escape that. So that is the old school method or the traditional method. We do have a new method that we can use to calculate the percentage grade for all the students. And that's the new method, which is the spill method. The spill method is much easier compared to the old school method. With the spill formula, you don't have to decide about using relative or absolute cell reference. You don't have to copy the formula down the column. You simply create one formula, you enter it, and it spills all through the cells. When you edit a formula, you only have to edit on one cell rather than all the cells. So to show you how that works, I will start my formula with the equal sign, and then I will select all the scores, the total scores for all my students. And then I will use the division symbol, and then I will divide with the maximum possible points. And you will see immediately once I enter, it will spill my answers to all the students. And you see right there, once I enter, it spills my answers to all the students. Now, as you can see, as I click on these other cells, on the formula bar, that formula is grayed out, meaning that there is nothing in these cells. The formula is only on this first cell. And you can see on the first cell where I created the formula, on the formula bar, that formula is not grayed out. But when I click on another cell, that formula is grayed out. So my formula is only on this first cell. And if I were to edit, I will only edit this and will rectify all my formulas on these other cells. So that's one of the advantages, or these are all the advantages of using the spill formula. Our next formula that we will learn is the average function. So if you click on cell A13 and we'll type their average score and tab to cell B13. So right here we will type the function equals average, and we will calculate the average for all the quizzes and for all the tests. So I will type equals to always start my formula, and I will type average. And as I do that, you can see all the functions that start with the letter AVE come up here. So I will select average. I will use the down arrow and I select average. And you can see the screen tip, it returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments, which can be numbers or names, arrays, or references that contain numbers. So instead of double clicking that, as I said earlier, I like to tab. So I would advise you to use the tab key to select the average function. And then now I will select the scores from my first student. I will not include the maximum possible points. I only want to average the scores for all the students. So I will select the score for my first student and select all the way to my last student on the list. And then I will Control Enter to remain in the same cell. So now I have the average score for quiz 1. So I would like the average score for all the quizzes and tests. And instead of using the formula, or instead of typing the formula for all the quizzes and tests, what I will do, I will use my fill handle. I will click there, and once I see my angry rabbit or my fill handle, this is my copy cursor, I will drag all the way to the right, all the way up to test 4. And then I will release my mouse, and I can see now it has copied all the way up to test 4. And if I press F2 for edit mode, I can see that it has selected the correct range reference, which is from my first student on the list to the last student on the list. And this is a relative cell reference because you can see it moves relatively throughout the copy action and it's selecting the same cell range. So I will escape to get out of edit mode. And now you can see all these have decimals. So I would like to introduce you something about number formatting. So all these have extraneous decimals. So once you look onto your ribbon, right here on the number group, it's on the home tab, the number group, you can see we have increased decimal button and we have a decreased decimal button. So if I were to decrease the decimal button, the decimals are still there, but I just use the decrease decimal button to show only one decimal or to show no decimals. If I want to increase my decimals, I will use the increase decimal button and it will increase all my decimals, and I can now see my decimals one more time. So another way that we can format our numbers, you can see right here that we have general number formatting right here, which is a decimal of these percentages. So if I select that using my selection cursor and select all those cells, we can see they are still in general number formatting. So if we were to format this as a percentage, we will either click that percent style, but once you click that percent style, you have to understand that never gives you any decimal places. This will only give you only percentages without any decimal places. So I will Control Z. The other way that we can format this as a percentage, I can click the down arrow right there and I can use percentage, and this one will always format your numbers with 2 decimal places. So if I click on that, I can see now that has been formatted to 2 decimal places. My decimals are still there, so if I were to increase the decimals, my decimals are still there. I can decrease them, but it's only formatted into 2 decimal places so that I can see this the way I want them to see. So the number formatting is a facade. We format the numbers to see what we want to see, but the real number lies underneath that cell. And that's why even if you're using formulas to do the calculations, you have to understand that Excel will see the real number that is underneath that cell. And we will learn more about this in our upcoming videos. We'll get to learn more about number formatting as a facade, and we'll also get to learn more as we do number formatting on the upcoming videos. Next, we will learn how to add borders and style to our data. We'll learn how to add the page setup and to print. But before that, I want to show you how to insert rows and columns. So if you would like to insert an extra row, I would say insert an extra row just before column A. I will bring my cursor in A1 and then I will use my mouse. And once I use my mouse, you can see I have another cursor right there that is a shaded arrow. So once I click on that, it selects the entire column. So with the entire column selected, I will right click on my mouse and then I will click Insert. And by doing that, you insert an extra column right there. So if you don't like the column and you would like to delete this extra column, no problem, you can do that. Again, just click on that cell in the column and then hover your mouse on top of the column headers. Once you see the shaded arrow, right click on that and then select delete. and then the extra column will be gone. Same thing if you would like to insert another row, you hover your mouse on the row headers, and once you see the shaded arrow, you right click and it selects for you the entire row, and then on the drop down menu you select insert. And just like that, we have inserted another row on top of our data. So we needed to insert an extra row, and then I will click on cell K1 and I will type traditional formula or old school formula. And then I will tab, and on L1, I will type spill formula and enter. So now I see on cell K2, I can see the entire text that is there. So what I will do, as you can remember, I taught you earlier how to wrap the text. So one thing that you also need to understand that you cannot wrap the numbers, but you can wrap the text. So this is a text and we will wrap it just like we did earlier in this video. So on the home tab, on the alignment group, click on the wrap text button and we see that is wrapped, but we don't like the way it's showing here. So I will use my adjusting cursor to expand my width of the column. And now that looks good. And then I will also adjust the width of the spill formula column. So I will click on cell L1 and I can either double click or drag to the right. So for this one, I will double click and I have adjusted the column width to that column as well. So the next thing that we'll need to do, we'll need to add borders. So I will select from cell A1. I will use my selection cursor and I will select all the way up to cell L13. And then I'll hold down the control key because I would like to select cells that are not next to each other. I don't want to select these three cells. I only want to select these cells right there. So I'm still holding down my control key and then I will release my control key. And then now I have only the cells that I would like to add borders to selected. I will do that again. So I will click anywhere. So if you want to select all the cells in your data set, you can use your cursor, selection cursor, and select all that together, or you can use the Control Shift 8 and it selects all that. But for our case, we don't want to select these three cells there. We don't want to add borders. So we will select cells that we want to add borders to all the way up to L13. And then still holding down the mouse, I will hold down the control key on my keyboard and then I will release my mouse and then I'll come to cell A14 and select the cells that I would like to add borders to. And once that is selected, I will release the control key and I will release the mouse. And then up here on my home tab, on the font group, I will select the button for all borders. And I have added all borders to the cells that I would like to add borders to. So the next thing that I would like to do, I would like to add a fill color to all the cells here that have a formula. So I will select total scores all the way up to L13. And then I'll hold down the control key one more time, still holding down my mouse. And then release my mouse and then select from cell B14 all the way up to cell I14. And then I will release the control key and release the mouse. And then I will come to the fill color button and I will select the color that I would like to do for that cells that I have selected. I will select that color. You can select the color of your choice. And now I have selected those cells and added styles to that. And then the next thing, I will select the maximum possible points, all the possible points, or that entire row. And I will add a color to that as well. You can choose the color of your choice. And then I will select the cells with the name, quiz, and the tests, which is the top row right there. And then I will also add some fill color to that as well. And I can see that is formatted. The other thing that I would like to do, I would like to bold these cells. So I will select that and select that. Hold down my control key because I'm selecting cells that are not next to each other, and then select that as well. And then I will bold that. And if I would like to change the font size, I can change the font size from there. But for this, I don't want to change the font size. I will leave it as font size 11. Something that I should point out that should always do as you work on your files is to save your work as you go, because you don't want to lose your work and then start all over on your work again. So since we already saved this file for the first time, as we work on it, you will just press Ctrl S, and then as you go, you press Ctrl S. This will save your work as you go. So the last thing that we'll need to learn in this video is to how to set a page setup and to print your work. So to print your work, if you press Ctrl P, you can see we are printing everything that is in this worksheet. And this is not what we want. So I will escape and I will show you how to set up a print area. So there are two ways that you can set up a print area. You can select on the section that you would like to print. And once that is selected, you click on the page layout and then you click print area, and then you set a print area. That way you have set a print area for yourself in that worksheet. So if I do Ctrl P, I can see that I'm only printing this area that I set up to print. Even though it's printing in 2 pages, we will rectify that. So I will escape and then I will remove the set area. So again, I'm on the page setup group and click on the print area button and then click clear print area. That if I do again Ctrl P, the print area is already cleared. So I'll escape. So the other way to do that, while I'm still on the page layout tab, page setup group, you can see the dialog launcher right there. So if you click on that, it opens the page setup dialog box. So I will cancel that. We do have a keyboard shortcut for opening that, and that is Alt P S P. And that opens up the same page setup dialog box. So when that is open, I can do the page setup from here. I can change the page orientation. Right now we can see it's in portrait. I will change that to landscape. If I would like to adjust the way my scaling will be on my paper, I can do that. If I need to change the paper size, I can do that. The other thing that I can do, I can go to the header and footer, and I can set up a custom header or a custom footer. For us, we will set up a custom footer. And when you hover on all these, you will see what each button represents. So on the left section, we will insert the file name. And then on the center section, we will do the sheet name. And then on the right section, we will do the date. And now we will press or click OK. And then now we can see from the preview, we have the file name, the worksheet, and the date already set up on the footer. So the next thing, we want to set up a print area. So I will click on the sheet tab right there. And then you see the print area box right there. So I'll click on that. And then once I click on that, I can now select the area that I want to print. So I will select from A1, and as you can see, as I am selecting, you can see the dancing ants, and you can see the range right here. That's the range that I selected to print. So I'm not printing all other things that are here. That is already set. So now I can click print preview. And I can see my print preview, it's still in 2 pages, but I would like this to print as 1 page. So what I can do, I can open the page setup from here one more time. And then I will adjust my margins. I will reduce my margins for the left and for the right. And then I will click OK. And now I can see my setup is only on 1 page, and I can see I have everything that I need to print only on 1 page. So I will escape to go back to my worksheet. So I've shown you how to set up a print area and how to print that. So in case you don't want this, even though you have set up a print area, once I hover on this, you can see I have a moving cursor. That cursor that you see right there is a moving cursor. So if you click on it, I can move this to where I want to move it. And this is the same also with your cells in your data. So if I click on that, and then once I see that cursor, I can move that to where I want to move it. And you can see as I move it, you can see it's changing to different cells where I'm clicking to move it. So if I move it, you can see it's moved right there. So I'll use Control Z to undo that. As I don't want to move that, I just wanted to show you how to move data or to move anything from your worksheet to another cell. As we end our introduction to Microsoft Excel video, we have learned these listed topics, and now we are ready for our Excel video number 2, where we will continue to gain more skills. See you in our next video. Thank you.